Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head over to Belgium, and this is a beer that was requested by one of you guys, the followers. I can't remember exactly who, but this beer was requested on one of the other Belgian beer reviews that I did. So for the first time we're going to go to Brouwerij van Honsebrouck, who are from Ingelmunster in West-Vlaanderen, and we're going to review one of the Kasteel beers. So this guy is called the Donker. It comes in at 11% ABV, and from what I gather this one is regarded as a quadruple. Rate Beer actually has it listed as a Belgian strong ale, but Beer Advocate has it listed as a quadruple. I think Rate Beer does the thing where they say it has to be an Abbey quadruple. This beer isn't produced by an Abbey, of course. It is produced by a brewing company, so I think that's why they're classing it as a Belgian strong ale. But from what I understand, a beer that is like 11% and is really dark from Belgium, it does tend to be a sort of quadruple. They do tend to call it a quadruple, but please do correct me on that if I'm wrong. I'm not so well versed in the various different beer styles and things like that when it comes to Belgium. As I say, I've neglected Belgian beer reviews for a little while on the channel, so over the next little while we are going to try and rectify that. But as always, I hope you guys enjoy my take on this beer, and I will take you through a little bit of a history of the brewery. So if you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I'll do from Kasteel in the future. You will see a review of the Trupel really quite soon. There's all the usual social media. If you want to see more beer reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Belgian beers I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes about the brewery then, and I do apologise in advance for any bad Flemish or Dutch pronunciations in this video. So anyway, as I've told you before, Brouwerij van Honsebrouck is located in Ingelmunster, but there's also a little town next to it called Izegem, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and they're in West Flanders, and the Kasteel beer is named after the castle on the Mendel River that was built by Robrecht de Vries, the Count of Flanders, around the year 1075, and this was actually known as the Fortress of Flanders. So several noble families actually occupied the castle over the coming centuries. So this included the De Rodes, the Van Geestels, the Burgundis, the Van Cleefs, the Plothos, and the de Montblancs as well. But in 1736 the castle was converted into a country mansion. So the von Honsebrouck family took over the castle in 1986, and they started producing the Kasteel beers in 1989, and of course these were named after this famous castle, the Fortress of Flanders. So the van Honsebrouck family do have quite a brewing dynasty, and this dates back to 1811 with Amandus, who was the mayor of a little village called Verken, and he owned a farm that included a dairy, a brewery and a distillery, and his business was taken over by Emile, who married Louise de Porter, who came from Ingelmunster. But there was a bit of a family feud, so Emile and Louise left Verken and set up breweries in Wichte and then Kortrijk, but neither of these were successful, and then later they moved to a small farm on the outskirts of Ingelmunster and they set up the St. Joseph brewery, which was really quite small. So in 1922 Louise, who took over the running of the brewery because apparently Emile wasn't so good at it, she took it over, but she later passed it on to her son in 1922, Paul, and he was joined at the brewery by his elder brother Ernest, and they expanded the brewery and they brewed bocks, exports and pills during that time. So Ernest actually remained a bachelor, but it was Paul's son Luke who took over the business in 1953 after his father became ill, and he'd studied brewing across in Germany. But he developed the Bacchus beer in 1954, and then he decided to drop the St. Joseph name in favour of Van Honsebrouck. So this was when the brewery became known as Brouwerij van Honsebrouck, and then he later developed the Geuze and the Louis Creek beer with yeast that he bought from Van Halen Frères in Uccle, and the Geuze was launched in 1958, and the St. Louis Creek was actually named after Luke's wife's grandfather, who was Louis Lampere. So apparently in the 1960s there was a bit of a rivalry between the two big Creek breweries in Belgium. So this was Bellevue, who were sponsoring Anderlecht from Brussels, and then the St. Louis name was worn on the Club Bruges shirts. And of course, if you know the Belgian league at all, I think it's called the Jupiler League, or at least it was for most of the time that I was playing FIFA and things. Those two clubs are really big rivals actually. But in the 1990s the Lambic brewers in Brussels really pressed the government to have a royal decree issued that stated conditions required for a beer to be labelled as Lambic. It's almost like the kind of geographical conditions you have on like Scotch whisky and Bavarian beer and all of these kind of things. But Luke was actually instrumental in persuading the government not to put to changed the geographical requirement because the Brussels breweries wanted it to be a 20-kilometre radius, and that would have excluded his brewery and a few others. He was basically saying, you know, we can produce these lambic beers as well, the Goys and the Creeks and the Frambois and all of these kind of things. So he was quite instrumental in making sure that that geographical requirement was changed. But the brewery has since been run by Xavier van Honsebrouck since 2009, and he's been modernising and expanding the brewery. It now has a capacity of around 25 million litres, and today they're producing the Castile beers. I think there's about 6 or 7 of these. They also do the St. Louis Lambics, the Bacchus beers, the Brejand, the Fond Tradition, and also the Passchendaele as well. So quite a prolific brewery, this one. I didn't realise that you know, the parent company of the Castile ones were doing the Bacchus beers. I've seen those all over the place, and you know, I've not seen the St. Louis Creeks actually, so I will need to have a little look for those at some point in the future. But I didn't realise this was quite as prominent a brewery as it is. But it's really cool, and I'm glad that I'm finally getting around to reviewing one of these beers. So I'll put the brewery website in the description for you below. They've got a really good history section that's more detailed than what I've just told you, so you can check that out, and it tells you all about the brewery, restaurants and cafes and things like that as well. But let's actually get on to the tasting of this beer itself. So I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork of this one before we open it up. Just checking on the camera control that you can see it. There you can see the Flanders Fortress in Ingelmunster up there. Really nicely presented beer, this one. All the Castile beers, by the way, tend to be very similar in the style of artwork, and they just have different colours depending on what beer it actually is. They do all have their own unique bottle caps as well, from what I gather. And there is actually a special version of this beer which is called the Cuvée de Chateau, which is aged for 10 years as well. So I don't know if I'll ever be able to review that for you, but that would certainly be a really, really cool review. I can only guess that when, you know, if it did make its way to Scotland or to Sweden, the two places I'm going to be, it would be ridiculously expensive. So maybe I do need to take a little trip out to Belgium at some point and have a visit to some of these breweries. But yeah, let's get this guy out then and we'll get on with the tasting. Nice smoky opening on the beer then, and we'll get it out and into the glass. So as I was saying, 11% ABV this one. Rate Beer listing it as a Belgian strong ale. Other people telling me though that this is a quadruple, and Beer Advocate listing it as a quadruple as well. I've never actually looked at what Untappd called it, but I've heard that this was a really nice beer. As I said, this was requested by somebody, and I do apologise for forgetting who it was, but it was requested by somebody on one of the other Belgian reviews that I did. So let's take a closer look at this beer then. So as you can see, this guy's poured a really nice sort of dark, I would say it's a dark kind of chestnutty colour, this beer. If you hold it up to the light, it does actually have quite a nice ruby edge to it, and you can tell by the way the light's coming through that. If this was a little bit lighter, you would be able to see this is quite a transparent beer, this one. It's not really hazy. So in terms of the head then, I would say about a 2/3 of a frothy, kind of fawn, very slightly beigey coloured head on this one. 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, and quite a few little ones just heading up towards the bottom of that head there. But you can really see, if you hold it up to the light and get the kind of ruby colour through it, you can see the little bubbles going up towards the bottom of the head there. But let's take a closer look at the aroma then and just see how we get on with this one. Ooh, that smells pretty nice, I have to admit. When it comes to Belgian beers, I will say my favourite styles are the tripels and the quadrupels, and I do love a good blonde beer as well. The wit beers, you know, they're alright. The broom beers, I think I need to try a few more of them to kind of properly get used to them. The broom beer was a style that I haven't quite taken to yet. But when it comes to Belgian beer, quadrupels and tripels are what it's all about for me. But that smells lovely. So the first thing that's going to jump out at you with this beer are the brown sugars. You know, there's a little bit of a slightly darker brown sugar. I always find that when you have Belgian beers, these dark Belgian beers, the brown sugars have got a really kind of unique smell to them, and I think it's the way that the yeast kind of interacts with the brown sugars. And of course, Belgian beer is all about the yeast. You know, the German beers are all about kind of about the hops and the malts as well. It's more about the two of them, but for me, the Belgian beers are all about the yeast. But with this one, straight away, sweet caramel, a little bit of a toffee. This beer does have a little bit of an almost buttery toffee note to it, but the brown sugars overall I think are quite dark in this one. It's not quite treacle or molasses, but yeah, they are leaning a little bit towards the darker side of things. It's a little bit roasty. There is a little bit of the kind of Belgian-y yeasty quality in there. It's not too prominent though compared to some of the other kind of quadruples and stuff like that I've had. You can smell it. It's just a little bit more subtle. It's got that nice kind of doughy, yeasty quality that you expect of a nice Belgian beer. It's almost like a kind of brown dough, if that makes sense, like a brown bread dough, something like that. There's a wee touch of earthiness and sort of herbal quality from the hops coming out of this beer as well, I would say. And there's definitely a bit of a kind of red fruity note to this one. Maybe there's even a little bit of biscuit in here actually, but there's definitely a little bit of a red fruity quality to this one. I would say it's kind of raisins and plums that are coming out of this beer for me. The red fruits are quite sharp, not overly sharp, but they do have a little bit of juicy sharpness to them, I would say. But it smells lovely. I mean, in terms of the aroma, it's not the most complex quadruple in terms of the aroma that I've come across, but it's got everything that you would kind of expect, I would say. But yeah, it does smell quite nice. It does have a little touch of a kind of herbal, medicinal quality to it. But that's how the Belgians used to treat their beers. They used to drink the beer and make it really strong, so, you know, they used to drink it because it was safer than the water. That's what the monks always used to do. They used to go on Lent and drink beer and get pished instead of actually eating food, which is a good idea, I have to admit. So yeah, let's get stuck into this beer then. So this one is the Brouwerij van Honsebrouck Kasteel Donker, a really nice beer, a recommendation from one of you guys. So let's get stuck in. Prost, Santé, Slange, Skål. Ooh. Right. That's an interesting one. What I would say about this beer, the first thing that jumps out at me with this one is how sweet it is. Like that's this beer, I think, in terms of the quadruple, the strong ale styles, this one, it's definitely more of that's the thing that really is quite prominent in this beer, is just how sweet it is. I think this is a bit sweeter than some of the other quads that I've had. Yeah, the sweet notes from the caramel are jumping out of this one quite a bit. I do like this beer though. I love that how these, you know, these similar styles, when you go around the different breweries, I say the same about the likes of the German Dunkels and the Doppelbocks and things like that. You know, when you go around these Belgian breweries as well, each of these different beers do have their own little kind of niches with them too, which is really interesting. But yeah, that's really nice. So with this one, you can feel a little bit of that kind of bready, doughy, yeasty character. That just blankets the middle of your tongue. It's not too prominent in this beer though. I would say this beer, to me, it feels a little bit lighter than a number of the other Belgian beers that I've had actually. The kind of big doughy, bready, yeasty thing that you expect isn't quite as prominent. It's just a nice, light, almost brown, bready quality to this one. It's really the kind of caramel and the brown sugars that are taking the prominence in this beer. So if you go into the middle of your palate there, you've got this nice sweet caramel in there. There's a little bit of a toasted quality, and maybe there's a little touch of a biscuity note to the beer as well. But yeah, caramel and toffee really quite prominent in the flavour of this beer. As your mouth adjusts to it, I think towards the front of the palate, there's a little touch of a kind of nutty flavour coming out of this beer as well, which is nice. But I'll tell you something, for 11%, this beer is ridiculously drinkable. You know, that's the dangerous thing when it comes to these Belgian beers. A lot of them are like that, really drinkable, but stupidly high in alcohol, you know? And that's why we love them, of course. But yeah, the malt base in this beer is absolutely lovely. The hops the hops in this beer I think are quite subtle. There's a little bit of earthiness there in the back corners of the palate. As you come further forward, it's a little touch herbal. Then at the front corners you can pick up a little bit of floral character. And then round the front curve of the palate, it's a little bit grassy, although in fairness to that grassy side of things, there is a little bit of a herbal quality there. Then just behind the front curve of the palate, that's where you get that little oily bubble, where the kind of fruity elements start to come out of the beer. But yeah, That's really nice. I do like how this beer goes together. I can see why it was recommended to me. It is really nice. As I say, it's definitely a little bit sweeter than the other quads and things that I've had recommended to me. But as I, I do like this beer. Certainly wouldn't hesitate to drink that again, and no doubts about that in my mind. But yeah, behind the front curve of the palate, as I was saying, that's where you get that little oily bubble where the nice fruity, juicy esters come out. What I would say about this beer, in the aroma, you would think that there's going to be a lot of juicy kind of plums and raisins to this beer, but it comes across as a little bit more light and figgy. It's kind of a candied fruity flavour that comes out of this one more than anything else. I wasn't expecting that with this beer. I have to admit, I was expecting it would be a little bit. I was expecting this beer would be quite dark, and the brown sugars and stuff would be quite dark. But this is really, if it's sensible to describe it that way, it's like a lighter quadruple this rather than anything else. It's got a nice, the brown sugars are a lot lighter and a lot sweeter, and the fruity side of things, it's a bit more candied and bright, if that makes sense. But it's really nicely done. I would be interested to know, those of you that are a bit more well versed in Belgian beer than me, do let me know if this one is classed officially as a quadruple, or if it's just a bit, or if, as Rate Beer says, it is just a Belgian strong ale. But I mean, the style doesn't matter too much. I'm just curious, because this one to me, it is as I say, it's a bit lighter and a bit more light in terms of its fruity flavours than some of the other quads that I have. But the main point to take away is that it's a bloody good beer, and that's the main point. The style doesn't particularly matter. It's more whether the beer's good, and this one certainly is good for me. So in terms of the mouthfeel of this one, then I would say. Yeah, I would say it's mid to full bodied. It's kind of on the borderline with these two. Carbonation, I would say moderate. Definitely say it's a little bit moderate. It's quite an oily mouthfeel, this one, which does suit it because of the prominence of the brown sugary flavours in this one. Good little bit of juicy fruit to this. It's not quite as juicy as I was expecting it would be. A lot of sweetness from the malt base, a little bit of toasted character in there as well, and the hops are very smooth. The Belgian yeast in this one is less prominent than you'll find with some other beers as well, and it's mainly the differences that I'm noticing in this beer that's making me wonder whether it is officially classed as a quad. But these guys do a trip ale, and that's what's confusing me a little bit. The fact that Kasteel do have a trip ale, but this one isn't officially called like a quadruple or something. That's what's making me wonder a little bit about this beer. But as I say, the style isn't so important, it's whether the beer's good, and this is a pretty damn good beer. So thank you to the recommendation, whoever it was that actually gave me this one, and I hope you've enjoyed my take on this beer. So let's leave it at that. A really interesting quadruple or Belgian strong ale, however it's to be classified. Really nice with its kind of sweet brown sugars and the slightly juicier tropical fruits. But I'm glad that I got to try this one, and I hope you guys have enjoyed my take on it. So until the next time, Slange just now. Thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Check out my social media. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Do let me know some other Belgian beers and breweries that you guys would like me to have a look at. Let me know your favourite beers from the Kasteel range and from Brouwerij van Honsebrouck as well. And thank you once again for watching. I will catch you guys very soon. This was the Kasteel Donker from Brouwerij van Honsebrouck in Ingelmunster in West-Vlaanderen in Belgium. A really nice beer, and I'm glad that I got to try this one. Until the next time, Slange just now, and I will catch you guys very soon. Proost, santé.